I was finally evicted. The car was repossessed, all that stuff.
The legal consequences led to losing your job or
The
the
my
behaviors?
behavior,
Yeah.
my behavior, my behavior. There was a picture going around of so our conference, the main executive boardroom was all glass, and you could walk by it through the hallway. There was a picture circulating with me laying down asleep that I had fallen asleep during a board meeting.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sobriety Diaries. I'm your host, Nate Kelly, best-selling author and founder of PodStudio, but most importantly, a recovering alcoholic 8 years from my last drink. I am so grateful to be bringing you these powerful stories of recovery told by you, those who lived them. If you're joining us for the first time, head over to thesobrietydiaries.com for more information on the show, our library of over 100 episodes, and to apply to be a guest on the show. Everybody has a story. Yours could help save a life. And with that, let's open today's diary. Very, very excited for today's conversation. Welcome back to the Sobriety Diaries, friends. My name's Nate Kelly, founder of PodStudio. More information about that in today's show notes. But please help me welcome today's guest. There's so much to talk about. I was inspired by his content on TikTok and was introduced through a mutual friend. Please welcome Dr. Dallas Bragg. Welcome.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you. Welcome. I'm actually better than ever today.
Wow, that's great to hear.
Yeah, I'm having a good morning already. So,
We can't say that every day, right? So you got to kind
I-
of grab onto it when we
yeah,
can.
that's right. Yep, it's contrast. You have to have
Yeah,
the bad to appreciate the good, and the good to appreciate the bad. So,
it wouldn't exist without
that's right.
the other,
That's right.
right?
Exactly right.
What part of the country are you in?
I am near Charlotte, North
Oh,
Carolina.
okay, cool. My
East
parents
Coast.
are in Charleston.
Okay.
Um, they moved there in retirement, so I've
Um,
been down through that part of the country more often these days than I ever have. It's beautiful.
It is. It is. I'm actually moving a few weeks near Greenville, South Carolina.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm
Well,
just
I
wondering.
definitely want to talk about the business and the resources that you are offering our brothers and sisters in the queer community. But I always like to start with a little backstory and understand, how we've gotten to this place now that you're able to help others and share
Sure.
your own experiences. I
Yeah.
know that crystal meth is a big part of your story. We'll talk about the Aftermath podcast too. I listened to a few episodes.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But tell us more about young Dallas and maybe how you were introduced to that lifestyle and how
Yeah.
we've gotten now to today.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have about three different versions of my story, how much time I have.
Oh, we've got plenty of
But
time. Tell us the most impactful
yeah,
version.
right. The most of that. Well, I think for me, when I explain my story, the most impactful part is how I feel like my my need for validation began. And that was because I grew up in West Virginia, in a county in West Virginia that's so rural there was no traffic lights. And to this day, there's still not a traffic light in the entire county.
Wow.
Yeah,
What
it's
part of West
very yeah.
Virginia?
So the very southern tip, it's kind of a geographical oddity, really. It just kind of sets off on its own. There's no major road and it's a lot
Got
of
it.
farm. Yeah.
I grew up in Eastern Ohio, so near like Weirton
Oh,
and
oh
Wheeling.
yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the top,
got it.
near the top of the state, and I'm
Yeah,
kind of south,
cool.
but
Okay.
yeah, but
But we see the news now with these sort of saturations of drug activity, and West Virginia always seems to be on the
yeah,
list.
it is. West Virginia is the last in terms of well-being scores too. So
Yeah,
health, mental illness, poverty, all everything, and drug use.
right.
And there was that documentary on Netflix, The Wild Wonderful Whites from West Virginia.
Yes, very
I knew,
familiar.
I actually knew some of them.
Wow. Okay.
And I can say that there was no dramatization done there or encouragement. That's them. So yeah, It's bad. I didn't grow up around drugs besides alcohol. My father was an alcoholic. He was abusive, emotionally more than physically, but in a lot of ways that was worse. I feel like the more I talk to men, it feels to me that what we didn't get as a child seems to be worse than what we did receive. And neglect is what I would
Mm,
just got a lot of neglect, emotional neglect. And so I was also always searching for his approval. And but I got told things like, you can't be my real son because he was the normal West Virginia kind of redneck, quote unquote, drinking and fighting, cussing, and all that stuff. And then my mom was Pentecostal holiness. And so I was somewhere in between, but I didn't fit anywhere, because I knew I was gay early on. But so I didn't fit in any crowd. However, I veered toward my mom, like a lot of us do. And so I grew up under that guilt and belief that this homosexuality was a demon
mm,
that could be exercised. And so I started this cycle of going up to the altar, asking for it to be taken, thinking that it was gone, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm sneaking my Men's
yeah.
Health magazine because we didn't have internet.
No,
You
yeah.
know?
It was
Yeah,
whatever you could find, right?
yeah, right. And so I just that, but that cycle continued, and so I got married right out of high school because I was afraid to be in the world. So I married a woman, and then we had kids right away, which I felt like was very secure for me. I knew I would never cheat on her, and I knew I wouldn't leave the kids, so I felt safe. But I still, kept in that cycle. That led
God, that
to,
has to be so
yeah,
conflicting every day just
yeah,
to wake up in a life that deep
yeah,
down really isn't your true
yeah.
self.
That you know, I can remember driving down the road to work. The voices in my head were so loud, and it wasn't like a schizophrenia voice. It was just this hatred for myself. That how can I face my wife and kids and yet be doing, have these feelings internally? And so I would scream and turn the radio up as loud as it would and roll the windows down just to try to quiet my mind. And so I just dove into work, and I dove into being the end all be all for my kids and my wife. And I enabled them to the point where no one had to do or feel anything.
Mm,
That's where I got my sense of purpose, and where I was able to push back all of the trauma, all of the feelings, just put them here so that I can take care of everyone else. And of course, that couldn't last long. So early 30s, I ended up in a mental facility, and I was planning my suicide. So that prompted me to come clean with my wife. But and I'll fast forward in a minute, but that was said to her and agreed upon in a way of, these are unwanted homosexual tendencies, which is a Christian term, that we can pray through, right? But it was so uncomfortable for her, we never spoke about it again.
mm.
And so, anyway, fast forward, I came out. So, coming out was my way of saying, I finally have somewhere I belong. I finally have somewhere I can fit in. I can be myself. I don't have to search and search and search for some type of external way to feel included. So, I had this exclusion schema. And early on, I was excluded everywhere, right? So, anyway, when I came out, there was a different experience. I wasn't included. In fact, I was more aware of my effeminate nature than I was before. That was the feedback I was getting. The only thing I knew was, at first was Grinder. And so I would show up to
Now,
wherever.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
No, go ahead.
but
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
I can get a picture. Now, are you divorced at this point? Was that
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so there was a divorce and then coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in North
And
Carolina,
were you monogamous during the marriage or did
yes,
okay, wow.
I was. I was monogamous. And so what happened was, when I came out, I moved to the guest bedroom. And 2 weeks later, I was gone. But in that 2 weeks, I told her, because she wanted me to stay even though I was gay. She wanted to work it out. That's how how dependent codependent she was.
Yeah.
I told her, well, I need to at least try this.
Yeah.
I need to at least lay hands on a man just to
Yes.
because I was like, maybe this is all for maybe this is a fantasy of some type. And so I did. That's when I discovered Grinder and I tried, and of course I knew right away, like, yeah, this is it.
This
This is
is
what I
it.
want. Yeah, yeah.
Hey there, future podcaster. I'm Nate Kelly, and today I'm thrilled to introduce you to something that is going to transform your podcasting journey. Are you ready to turn your passion for podcasting into a thriving reality? Let me introduce you to the Podcast Launch Accelerator. Imagine a 6-month mentorship program where you get personalized one-on-one coaching, an action plan tailored to your goals, and a comprehensive podcast growth blueprint. But wait, there's more. We're throwing in exclusive interviews with industry experts, a professional podcast success toolkit, and access to our monetization masterclass. At the end of 6 months, we guarantee you a spot in the top 10%, appearance on top iTunes or Spotify charts, and a monetized podcast with host read ads. Ready to launch your podcast? Click the link in today's show notes to secure your spot in the Podcast Launch Accelerator.
In that year, I moved in with someone and just jumped right in. But what I was met with was more comments about how I dressed and how I acted and how I looked than I ever received as a pretend straight man. And so I spiraled pretty quickly emotionally. And the first bar I went to, there was someone there I was telling my story to for some reason, but he said, you might as well save your money for the kids to go to a psychiatrist because you've ruined them now. And he said, you couldn't have just pretended to be straight for a few more years until they were adults. And so I just went to my car and I'm just crying into the steering wheel and I'm like, where do I belong? Am I ever going to feel included anywhere? Am I ever going to feel complete? And if I don't feel complete here, then where?
Yeah, I
And
thought this was I thought this was going to be the change that
yeah,
I needed, right?
yeah, yeah. And the only thing I knew about gay people before I came out was Will and Grace, the TV show,
Yeah.
and any news coverage I saw for pride parades. And in my mind, I had this preconception of what it would be like. So when I went to this bar, I really thought I was going to be hugged. I was going to be welcomed. There was going to be glitter and rainbows,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't. It
That's
just wasn't.
interesting because what we see portrayed as gay culture is either that, pride parades and this sort of
Mhm,
fabulousness,
mhm,
or some negative connotation, a
right.
hate crime or a protest. So,
Mhm,
from the outside, it's this very polarizing black or white sort of
mhm.
situation.
Yeah,
And I can see where that sort of perception
yeah,
came from.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of straight people, heterosexual people, also form their opinion on their gay friends who are on Grindr a lot, and they have this idea that we're all hypersexual,
Right.
you know, and that Grindr it represents the gay man, and it doesn't.
100%.
Yeah. And that's the impression that, and that's where I went was Grindr and these gay bars. So I spiraled, and then just became my sex addiction came out. And I started understanding that I could hook up on Grindr, pretend I wear a backward baseball hat, and still pretending to be someone I wasn't.
Mm.
And show up and I would get my validation through sex. We really didn't even have to talk.
No.
They didn't have to know how I talked.
Yeah.
I could just grunt and that's what they wanted, and and then I would go home. And so I got addicted to that. That wasn't enough, 2, 3 times a day, whatever. And eventually I was asked if I partied. And this was a Sunday afternoon. So I was like, okay, day drinking,
Right.
barbecue. I don't know,
Yeah,
something.
we hear this party and play or P and P
Yeah.
once you get
Yeah.
into like the scene, especially with grinder hookups, and
Yeah.
it can be as innocent as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So asked if I partied. At the time, I was drinking a lot. And so I went to the house. The house was everything you would expect it to be: overgrown yard, busted out window. I'm like, where's the party? But the guy that shows up is very attractive, very hot. And which I found that, the perception we have of crystal meth users is completely wrong as
Mm.
well. So very attractive man came to the door and I was sold and I was like, I don't care what's happening, this is it. Yeah. And so he said he handed me a pipe and I had no idea what it was, yada yada yada. He introduced me. So the thing about it, the experience, the important part to know here is that he looked at me, talked to me, and touched me in the way that I had been seeking. He didn't care how I acted. He didn't care what I looked like. He, to me, he really and truly wanted me. And feeling that, and then feeling what the drug did, which was take away any inhibitions I had, and any doubts I had about myself, just erased away in a puff. That was the first time in my entire life. I was 37, 38, something like that. That was the first time in my entire life that I felt like I had arrived somewhere, that I
Mm.
was included somewhere, that I could be myself. This was my true self. Finally, everything had fallen off. These years, these decades of trauma and pain and wondering where I belonged, I finally found it. And that feeling is, a lot of gay men will tell you they're addicted to crystal meth because it's good sex, but I think it's not the sex. It's finally feeling liberated and free to be yourself and without the guilt and without the layers of shame and the internalized homophobia and all the other things that we face. So it was a magic elixir for me that took me on a ride. And I jumped on with both feet because I was like, I have to have more of this. And I was a college professor and I was an executive at a law school and I was making, I don't know, 140,000, something like that. So I had the money and I just went in. And less than 3 years later, I was homeless. I
Wow.
mean, I lost it all quickly. Got lost my job quickly, got arrested for possession 3 or 4 times. Um, I was finally evicted. The car was repossessed, all that stuff. I was
So the legal consequences led to losing your job
so no,
or
the
the
my
behaviors?
behavior,
Yeah.
my behavior, my behavior. There was a picture going around of so our conference, the main executive boardroom was all glass, and you could walk by it through the hallway. There was a picture circulating with me laying down asleep that I had fallen asleep during a board meeting. So
Got it.
I was let go and was on a severance package. So I had all this money coming in with nothing to do, which was kind of COVID-like,
Mm.
because such an uptick in use during COVID was the same thing. We have all this government money coming in with nothing to do.
And nothing but time on our hands.
Right, exactly. And so I just got so involved, and I would bring in these wounded birds, these guys that they were hot, but they didn't have a car, they didn't have a job, they weren't all there, and I felt bad
Yes.
for them. And it kicked in. This whole enabling thing still kicked in. I still needed to feel like I had a purpose. So I would come in and let them live. Well, I picked the wrong one who was schizophrenic, and he left the house and went to the police department and told them all sorts of things that I was doing that weren't true, but it was enough for them to get a warrant. And so anyway, that was my first arrest. So then
Wow.
after that, yes, I had to. If I worked, it was restaurants,
Yeah.
because they didn't do background checks. But I continued to get arrested. But I'll fast forward to the decision to get sober, if that's okay, or if
Yeah.
you want to get some more grimy details, I can do.
No, I
Um,
think, we probably understand where it goes. The
Yeah,
isolation, the depression, the
yeah. So my last time in jail, no one in my family or friends would answer my call this time. My daughter was 16 at the time. My son was 14. And my daughter, ooh, emotion. I tell this story all the time, but there's something
yeah.
coming up. But my daughter was always the only person, and no matter what I did to her, and I did a lot of things, I wrote bad checks on her account. I had her help me shoplift. There's this all these things that I did to her. She always was stood by me, and she always cared about my well-being. So she answered the call from the jail. And so she and my son came and picked me up when I was released. We went to a park and we just talked. And at the time, their mother, while I was in my addiction, she had some addiction problems. So my daughter says, we need a parent and we need you to be that parent. She's like, I can't be the parent to you and mom anymore, you know. And so I made a commitment that day. I was like, okay, I'm doing this. So homeless, nothing but a shirt on my back. She drove me uptown and I walked into a restaurant, got a job. And I enrolled myself in drug treatment court. So luckily in this county, there's drug treatment court. You have to jump through a ton of hoops, go through rehab, get tested 4 or 5 times a week, and all just the list goes on. I had to see a judge every 2 weeks. But after a year and a half, I graduated and they dismissed all of my charges and expunged all of my charges.
Wow.
I have a clean record today.
Amazing.
But we worked, the three of us. Actually, when I say I built my life, I don't say that. I say we rebuilt my life. I'm like feeling emotional today, but
It's
the
okay.
three of us, the three of us rebuilt my life, our lives, and so it took a while, but everything returned back, but better than ever, and we're closer than ever.
If you're looking for a new recovery resource and a community of peers with lived experience, you have to check out my friends, Dave and Susan Kenny at Emergo Academy. Dave and Susan bring over 15 years of experience in residential treatment, recovery coaching, speaking and mentorship, and now as best-selling authors and hosts of Emergo TV. Emergo TV is a live call-in style show where they answer all of your questions about sobriety, mental health, family and life challenges, and anything else you may need guidance on. Let's face it, life can be hard and we shouldn't do it alone. Head over to emergoacademy.com for more information on their brain first approach to recovery, their best selling book, Actualized Recovery, and where to find Emergo TV live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's Emergo Academy, EMERGO Academy.com, and we'll see you this Thursday.
In my experience, I saw the gaps in understanding of clinicians, of treatment centers, of the court system, of the plight of a gay man on crystal meth. It's different. It has its own nuances. It has its own personality,
Yeah.
and there's a different reason why they're doing it. Although at its core, addiction is, yes, similar. But as you know, with this drug, there's so many different circumstances that you have to take into consideration that they were missing. They just didn't get it. And so I decided I was going to try to fill in some of those gaps by becoming a sobriety coach for gay men.
That's amazing. I wish there were more of them. That specificity is important, I think, for the community.
At the time, decided to create a support group of other types of people. And I became a part of a spiritual group, a lot of middle-aged hippies.
I love
And
it.
and we go on adventures and we do plant medicine and even drink cacao and open our hearts and we do all the stuff. And it wasn't, that most of them were straight and hardly any of them were in recovery. But there was something about each time we met, it was about how do we get better? How do we heal more? What is our future like? It wasn't a commiserating on how bad the week was or how bad I need another meeting. It was more about let's support one another and be and reach our full potential more and more every day, and more about self-actualization than anything else. And that felt right for me, and that really worked for me.
I think it's important to have recovery resources that relate to you specifically. And it has to be something that you enjoy doing and that you incorporate into your daily life, and that you can, there's that accountability of whatever practices you incorporate into your recovery. You have to enjoy doing it, right?
Yeah, right. Right. I'm not a fan of people feeling obligated to do a certain thing or follow a certain sobriety journey because someone else did it.
Mm.
Just like you're saying, it has to work for you, and it has to resonate and speak to your authenticity and be in alignment with who you are. And I then, for the first time, really felt included, genuinely included in a group of people who saw me for my soul and not anything else. And we didn't have to talk about addiction every single day. We just talked about love, love and connection to the earth and to one another. And it really fed me in a way that I hadn't been. So,
Mm.
yeah.
So you mentioned plant medicine and nature, a connection to nature.
Mhm.
What other sort of resources do you use with your sobriety coaching clients?
Hmm. Yeah, so with my sobriety coaching clients, we find what works for them. Some people like Dharma recovery, some people like smart recovery, some people I have clients in psychedelics in recovery. We kind of we search for what works for them. And some people just, there's some triggers you have to work through. The whole concept of higher power just is an issue for some people.
Yeah,
Um, and we just I like to tailor each client to what is going to work for them. Let's take what resonates with you about this, what resonates with you about that. Let's cherry pick and create your own program. And if it's working and you feel like you're reaching your full potential every day, you feel like you are improving and healing, then let's go with it. Let's
let's
go
do
with
more of that.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, let's do more of that.
Such great information, and I think what you're doing, Dallas, is so necessary for our community, and bringing awareness to this and chipping away at the stigma associated with the sex addiction side of things. Thank you so much for the conversation today.
Thank
Where can
you.
people find you online if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, well, my TikTok seems to be getting popular right now. So
Great.
I hired a little 19-year-old to help me with it.
Love
And
that.
it's taken off in the last month, so I'm happy for that. But it's Dr. Dallas Bragg, so Dr. Dallas Bragg, DrDallasBragg. So I do write a weekly blog and newsletter on my website, drdallasbragg.com. It is more of a broad level discussion about addiction than it is crystal meth. So I said my tick a handle, yeah, a handle anywhere, any Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, YouTube. The podcast. I just started a podcast in April called The Aftermath. And I will tell you, I started this podcast just I was like, I just hope, I can help someone, and within a week I'm getting these messages from gay men saying, I needed to hear you say what you said, or I needed to hear that. And I'm just I'm beside myself. I
Yeah.
just love it. I just love what it's doing, and I love that I'm doing it.
The
And so
feedback is what keeps me
yeah.
going with the podcast. It's amazing.
Mm.
I say in every episode, if we help just one person, it's worth it. And I truly mean that. So it sounds like you're already doing that. Welcome to the recovery podcasting family.
Yeah, I love it. And it has its own website too, aftermath.net. It also has brought, wow, I'm really trying to cry today. It has
Let
also
it out.
has also brought my brother and I together after decades. He had PTSD from being in Afghanistan, and he's recovering from that now and retired. And so he has taken on the editing and of the podcast, and he's my little assistant. And
It's
he has
amazing.
started in managing the YouTube channel for the Aftermath. And so we talk every day, and we went decades without talking. So I'm just really loving what life is doing right now, all together.
It's because you're putting positivity and help out there for other people. And now
Yeah.
it's coming back to you. So keep it up. You're doing great
Ah,
things.
thank you very much.
So
Yeah,
glad that our paths crossed and just grateful that, I could be a little part of your story and help to bring awareness to this again.
well, I appreciate this, and I know that you have quite the following in the audience. So I really appreciate. I get triggered often by being ignored, or I look for reasons to be excluded still to this day,
Yeah.
and I'm getting through that. I'm getting better at it, but you reaching out to me was more than just an opportunity. It was a level of healing for me, so I appreciate it.
God. It's contagious today. Well, that is the least I could do, and I'm so grateful that you came on to share your story. So head over to drdallasbragg.com. Dallas, let's keep in touch, my friend. I'd love to
Yes,
perhaps collaborate on something else in the
I
future.
would
Who
love to.
knows?
I would love that. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day, my friend. We'll talk
You
soon.
too.
Thanks so much for listening today, friends. Hopefully, you heard something inspiring and that resonates with you. If you're an aspiring podcaster or have your own message to share, head over to podcastnate.com and book a discovery call. I have helped countless aspiring podcasters to launch their show and share their message, and I'd be honored to help you do the same. Remember, everyone has a story. Yours could help save a life. Make sure you subscribe to the Sobriety Diaries so you never miss an upload. We're back with new episodes every Wednesday. Bye, everyone.